Hey everyone, and welcome back to Vintage Gunpla. So today we are talking about the 1986 no grade Zaku III. This is a 144 scale kit, and I have a lot of thoughts about this kit. I just wrapped it up today. I just put some top coat on it, and it is finally done. I've been working on this kit for like 3 or 4 weeks now, and it's been a heck of a build. Very, very challenging. So if you don't know, these really older kits, I'm not sure what year it ended, but they are glue together kits. So you're going to need to use some Tamiya cement or something similar and glue together every part and piece of this kit. There is zero snap fitting. There are, of course, the pieces that, push together that are on pegs and joints and things like that, but nothing snaps together, which is fine, I guess, because there are so many crazy, crazy seam lines and gaps and issues where the mold gets kind of funky, the sculpt gets kind of funky, that you're going to be like puttying this up, putting your cement in, trying to fill those seam lines, sanding this down, doing a ton of work to make this kit look good. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a before and after right here, and you can see out of the box, this kit doesn't really look fantastic at all. But I think the place that I got it to now, I think it looks really, really cool. And I think, previously I said the Gerber Tetra was my favorite build. I still think that that's my favorite kit, but I think just in terms of the sheer amount of, work that I put into this kit, and also like where I took it from where I started to where I landed, I think this is my favorite build of all time at this point. That said, I'm not too crazy to jump all the way back to an 80s kit anytime soon. I have a few in my backlog and it's not out of the question, but it's just the time commitment. It's a lot, and I'm a really busy person, and I don't have like 3 weekends to dedicate to just sanding, like nothing else but filling and sanding and filling and sanding and going through like dozens of sanding sponges. It gets very tedious very fast. That said, seeing it in its final form is super rewarding and cool, but it's just a lot of work. And I think, for the next few builds I do, when I do these vintage kits, I want to kind of, go to something a little bit more modern where there's some snap fitting and, maybe even some, a little bit of undergating in there, so you don't have to do like too much work. Again, I love doing the work. I find it really fun, but there's a certain amount where it just becomes tedious. And I was thinking while doing this kit, like, okay, if I'm doing this amount of work, like I may as well be doing a resin kit. The fact that it's a plastic model kit, it seemed kind of silly for the amount of work I was putting into it, but that's a whole nother story. So I think in terms of the kit itself, I think the sculpt is generally pretty good. I think it looks really cool. I much prefer it to the HGUC Zaku III, which I think, they did what they typically do, which is they slim down the bulkiness, they make the chest piece smaller, the legs longer, they make it look more modern. And I think, I don't know, I'm just not the biggest fan of this. This reminds me of old school 80s mecha. It has that old school 80s mecha charm. Things like, Pat Labor, Bubblegum Crisis, all these old classic animes. This kit feels like, it could be in those universes, where I think these new kits, it's like they've kind of designated what a Gundam looks like. It has, long, slender legs and a tiny torso and a tiny head and like all these different, I guess, qualifications for what a Gundam kit should look like. And I think back in the day, they didn't do that as much. There's all kinds of funky stuff. And like, this is not a realistic kit. And you'll find out when you try to pose it, like, this thing could not walk if it were real, but I don't care because it's a statue in my room and it's going to sit on my shelf and it looks freaking awesome. So, that's kind of how I feel about the sculpt and the style of the kit. Also, I think, looking at it side by side with the painting on the cover of the box, yes, I did choose, to do some different things, customizing the color a little bit, changing the scheme, but it really feels like that, right? It feels like something out of one of these drawings or paintings, or like fresh out of the anime. And I think that's one thing I want to note as well. The edges are very, very soft. It has this very soft feel, not a lot of like hard, sharp corners, not a million bajillion panel lines. It's just very soft and simple, and I love that. I did go ahead and hand paint a ton of this kit. So at first I was trying to do a no paint kit like I did with the Gabura Tetra, but I quickly realized that was just simply not going to be possible because there were pieces that could not be fixed with Tamiya cement alone. They needed putty. The gaps were just too extreme. No amount of cement was going to fix it. Even, you know, cutting up your runners and putting them in a little jar with some cement and kind of letting it melt into this paint and painting it on, even that wasn't enough. I just needed the straight up putty. I used some Tamiya basic putty. And then, you know, I just said, okay, cool, I'm going to have to paint this kit. So I did a lot of masking, a lot of hand painting. I used no spray paint, so it's all brushed. I used Vallejo acrylic model paints, and I just made sure that they were nice and thin, and I watered them down so that I didn't get too many, you know, streaks. One issue that I did run into, and this is my first time really hand painting this much of a kit, is I got a lot of not quite bubbles, but just like a grittiness to the kit, and it felt almost like I didn't do a good enough job of maybe washing the kit down after doing sanding, and maybe some dust accumulated and it kind of formed some texture in a few areas here and there. That said, once I did the matte coat, I think it took care of a lot of it, and I think at a glance, it looks really nice and really matte and really finished and really cool. So I'll just show you really quick some issues with the actual posability of the kit. So taking the kit, of course, you can rotate the head. That's pretty straightforward. The arms, you know, you can kind of move them around, but I mean, this thing, I don't know if you can, it is super wobbly. I mean, there is no sense of stability to any of these arm joints. So it's, you know, it can hold a pose. You know, you can kind of probably get it in some kind of, you know, firing pose there if you really fiddle with it. But for me, I think the best and, you know, most stable way to display this kit in my collection is to just kind of have the gun down. One thing I will also note about the rifle is it did not fit in the kit's hand at all. So what I did is I wrapped a bunch of masking tape around the handle of the kit, and then I painted that black with a Gundam marker so it kind of blends in at a glance. It's not going to really stick out too much. And I just did that until it was fat enough that it fit in the hands of the Zaku here. So yeah, as you can see, like it just, you know, you try to put something up and it just kind of flops. Well, it's kind of staying up there now. I also took a little bit of putty, and I puttied some of the joints to make them a little bit tighter, because this one on the left especially, I mean, you can even see here, it's really loose. So, you know, that's one negative thing about the kit. Again, for the way that I'm going to be using it and displaying it, it's basically going to be a statue, so that doesn't really bother me. But if you really want to pose it or get it up on like a, you know, like a, I don't know, a little stand or something, then that might be an issue for you. You can see there are some, you know, flaws here with my paint job. Again, it was my first time painting this much. You can see here, it's kind of a little bit back heavy. That's another thing that I'll say. But I think, you know, generally once you get it in a pose, it will stay there. It's not going to move around too much. But getting in that pose, it's a little challenging. You know, I won't lie. You can see some areas here where I had to putty, and there's kind of like a little bit of a difference in color. And some areas here on the thrusters where I probably could have sanded a little bit better. But to be honest with you, toward the end of this kit, I was getting a little bit sick of it, having had worked on it for 3 weeks, and I have a bunch of other stuff in my backlog that I'm excited about, and I kind of just wanted to wrap it up. And yeah, that's what I did. So I don't know if there's anything else to say about this kit. So one thing I will say about the manual is, unfortunately, you know, these photos that are on the side of the box, they don't really appear anywhere in the manual. The manual does have a few different photos, but, you know, they're not really the best. I mean, I was able to use them kind of as a guide for some coloring to see that the inside of the thrusters, yeah, that's kind of cool if you paint them red like that. But all in all, I was not super jazzed with this manual. You can see here, there's some illustrations, but they're not really the greatest illustrations. They're like a little bit, I wouldn't say low res, they just look like a little bit kind of sketchy, a little bit concept arty. And, you know, I like these other, I guess, instruction booklets where they have like these really cool detailed pieces of artwork. I guess you could say that here about, you know, the backpack here, that's a better drawing, and those different variations of the head part of the unit, that's kind of cool. But I don't know, I was a little bit underwhelmed with this booklet, especially considering how cool some of the other, you know, vintage manuals and instructions are. But, you know, no big deal, right? I was able to use these as a color reference to get my painting done. And of course I could look up photos online of other kits as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna end up by showing again some more comparison shots of the before and after of this kit. And thank you so much for watching. I'm going to try to have some more videos out for you shortly. And if you enjoyed this video, maybe click on one of the other videos and you might like that too. If you're into vintage Gunpla, definitely, you know, give me a subscribe to the channel. And also leave a comment. I like to know what you think about these old 80s kits. Do you like working on them? If you do, you know, what kind of tips would you have for someone like me, or maybe someone getting, you know, just getting into these vintage kits to make it a little bit easier? Be curious to know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you around.